Literally made a video about this like 2 days ago, and yet here we stand with so much information and a clear expose of Mark Cuban just completely lying to all of our faces. So what's going on, guys? Your boy Mike here. Before we get to the content, if you leave a like on this video, subscribe and turn on our notifications, and comment what jersey you want in the comment section down below, you'll enter for a jersey giveaway. And of course, make sure to check us out on the Laced Up podcast in the comment section down below. Now that we got all that out of the way, cue the intro. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? Guys, if you remember a few days ago, I released a video on this very interesting report from Tim Cato and Sam Amick from The Athletic. And I'm not gonna lie, I even said in the video that I'm very skeptical about these reports. Very, very skeptical about these reports because some of the claims that were being made in this video just were very strange. So let's start it from the very top. About 2 months ago, I made a video in regards to Luka Doncic's relationship with Kristaps Porzingis, and Mark Cuban came out and compared Luka Doncic and Kristaps Porzingis to Jason Terry and Dirk Nowitzki, saying, if you remember when we first got Jet, Dirk was not a fan. Dirk did not like him, and we lost in a playoff series because Jet made a mistake against Steve Nash, and that just made it even worse. They weren't best friends at the beginning, but they grew to like each other and grew to be great friends, and that's just part of the process when you've got young kids who are growing up. It took forever before Dirk and Jet did anything off of the court together. A long time, yeah. I mean, KP and Luka get along fine. It's just that they're different people. They like to do different things. Ultimately, we saw that Luka and Kristaps Porzingis couldn't make it past their consistent roadblock in the NBA playoffs in the form of the Los Angeles Clippers. They would end up losing. And while there were questions about whether Porzingis and Luka were a right fit for each other, it was presumed that all you really needed to do at that point is try to trade for an additional piece to put next to Luka and Kristaps. But here's where it gets really interesting. At the very end of the season, when Mark Cuban was asked about whether or not he would fire Rick Carlisle, he came out and said that he wouldn't make a change unless if it was necessary, and since the problem that the Mavericks have doesn't necessarily pertain to coaching currently, that he wouldn't try to fire Rick Carlisle. And the general manager, Donnie Nelson, who was the president of basketball operations for the past 24 years, was presumed to be the same guy that was going to be in the office this offseason. And then this report from Sam Amick and Tim Cato came out. And in this report called Inside the Mavericks Front Office, Mark Cuban's shadow GM is causing a rift with Luka Doncic. We heard something that was just absurd, okay, where there is this individual by the name of Haralabos Voulgaris, who is a well-known sports gambler who is hired by team owner Mark Cuban and has been on the Mavericks over the past 3 years. Voulgaris and Luka Doncic don't get along. Doncic really doesn't like this guy, and that Voulgaris had to work with Donnie Nelson and even had more power than Donnie Nelson. The biggest example of this being that at some point, Voulgaris went ahead and drafted the players of his choosing, Josh Green and Tyrell Terry, without even consulting the scouting department of the Dallas Mavericks. And again, Mark Cuban apparently is really impressed by how Voulgaris is committed to an analytics-driven spread pick-and-roll offense with Luka Doncic as the focal point, which he has tried implementing in the past couple of seasons. And most people don't understand why on earth that Voulgaris has all this power. They kind of had like a dual general manager role where Donnie Nelson went ahead and traded for Kristaps Porzingis and Tim Hardaway Jr. in 2019, Josh Richardson in 2020, and JJ Redick in 2021, and Voulgaris went ahead and drafted the players that he wanted without really saying anything. The article then concludes with saying that Dallas's franchise player dislikes Voulgaris. Doncic's strained relationship with Voulgaris predated their incident in February, and it wasn't their only incident either. This season, Vulgaris attended his first game in mid-January, frequently appearing courtside at home and also traveling with them on the road in the months that followed. In mid-April, during the final minute of a home defeat to the New York Knicks, Vulgaris was seen on the game's broadcast footage, standing up and leaving with about 45 seconds remaining. While the Mavericks were trailing by 10 points at the time, they cut the deficit to 6 and extended the game 7 more possessions before eventually losing. Mark Cuban said that I really like what Bob brings to the table. He does a great job of supporting Rick and the front office with unique data insights, and that he has a great grasp of AI and the opportunities it creates for gaining an advantage, which is important to Mark Cuban. But he isn't any more influential than any other data source on the team. Now, this is where things get sketchy, because when Tim Cato came out and tweeted that this man has the most influential voice in the Mavs front office since being hired, initiating transactions, dictating rotations, and even frustrating Luka, there are internal fears of how it could affect Luka's future. Mark Cuban quote tweeted this and said it's total BS. But here's where things get a little sketchy, because yesterday, after 24 seasons with the Dallas Mavericks, Donnie Nelson and the Mavericks, quote unquote, mutually agreed to part ways. But then, as time progressed forward, we found out there was no mutual agreeing to part ways. Donnie Nelson was fired from his job after 24 seasons. Bear in mind, this is the only general manager that was able to help Mark Cuban take the Dallas Mavericks to the promised land and win a NBA Finals. Bear in mind, Luka Doncic is very fond of Donnie Nelson, and he said that in response to this, it was kind of tough to me. I really like Donnie. I know him since I was a kid, and he was the one that drafted me. So it was tough for me seeing that, but I'm not the one making decisions here. And make no mistake about it, if there was no Donnie Nelson, then the Mavericks would never have drafted Luka Doncic, because Donnie Nelson had very strong ties to Europe before joining the Dallas Mavericks. And you could immediately see that influence in the fact that the Mavericks went ahead and traded for Dirk Nowitzki during the NBA draft, and now had another European star to build around in Luka Doncic. Now, it gets even crazier than this, because usually when you have one member that has been part of your team for 24 years, especially your president of basketball operations, gets fired after apparently a stalemate. And if you go into this article from Sam Amick and Tim Cato, which came out 5 hours ago, apparently what happened was Donnie Nelson began to wonder whether if he was truly in charge of the team's roster or coaching staff anymore. But when he relayed these fears to Mark Cuban, sharing his growing belief that Vulgaris, the former professional gambler who served as the team's director of quantitative research and development, was encroaching on his influence over personnel moves and strategy, the course correction that he'd never hoped for arrived. Nelson wanted Vulgaris to stay in his proverbial lane to avoid overstepping the bounds of his role and to focus on being a trusted advisor to Cuban, whose analytics-based views would always be taken into account. Dallas would have preferred to project stability ahead of a crucial summer in which Doncic was eligible for a Supermax contract extension, and he indicated a desire to sign. Instead, it appears that within the front office, there is turmoil and dysfunction. And I don't think there's only turmoil and dysfunction, because according to Adrian Wojnarowski, Rick Carlisle, the only head coach in Dallas's history that has ever won a NBA championship with the roster, informed Mark Cuban today that he will not be returning as a head coach next season. In this statement to ESPN, after a number of in-person conversations with Mark Cuban over the last week, today I informed him that I will not be returning as head coach of the Dallas Mavericks. This was solely my decision. My family and I have had an amazing 13-year experience working with great people in a great city. It has been an honor to work alongside Mark, Sint, Donnie, Finn, Keith, Dirk, J. Kidd, and every player and assistant coach I've had here. Dallas will always be home, but I am excited about the next chapter of my coaching career. Mark Cuban responded to this by saying that I truly love Rick Carlisle. He was not only a good coach, but also a friend and a confidant. Our relationship was so much more than basketball, and I know that won't ever change. Carlisle had 2 years left on his contract, and he spent 13 seasons as the Dallas Mavericks head coach. Now, here's the thing that's very sketchy about this. How bad does it need to be in Dallas for you as a head coach that probably has unlimited stability there, considering that you are the only one to ever win a NBA championship there, to come out and say, hey, I don't want to coach this transcendent talent in Luka Doncic? How bad does it have to be in Dallas for that to take place? Well, apparently there has been simmering tension between Luka Doncic and Rick Carlisle, and that was a concern within the Mavericks organization. The expectation was that he'd return next season, but he would have been on the hot seat. This way, Rick Carlisle gets to leave on his own terms, and there are some pretty attractive coaching opportunities for him as well. I can imagine if you're the New Orleans Pelicans, well, Rick Carlisle would definitely be a great get. Or if you're the Portland Trail Blazers, for instance, there are a lot of attractive job opportunities for a head coach like Rick. So let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think about all this information. And if you made it to the end, make sure you leave a like, because this is our second upload in like 2 hours. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.